Next time they shine your light in the sky, don't go to it. The bat is dead. Well, here I am.
You're listening to Elan, MenStuff writer and DC aficionado, and myself, Jeremy, MenStuff editor and average DC fan, I'd say, but a big fan of what we're talking about today. So, we're going to be chatting about Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. So, I think to kick it off, let's dude, what was guess we won't go into spoilers just yet. I guess we'll
we'll keep it low on the spoilers.
For anyone listening, we'll mention when we're going to go into spoiler territory. But I think just for overall opinions on the movie, from a top level kind of thing, what were your thoughts on Batman vs Superman?
I enjoyed it a lot. I have to admit, I walked out of the theater feeling like I've never really felt after a movie before. I'm not sure how to explain it. It was an experience. It wasn't all positive or all negative, but I felt like I'd watched something that I'd never seen before. The story, I think maybe it's got to do with the fact that comic book material in general has been fairly light. This felt like it had a very, very grounded and close to home feeling to it. Completely enjoyed it. There were parts that I was a little off about. That might be going to spoiler material. A few things that maybe if it was my choice, I wouldn't necessarily have done it. I liked, that it happened, but it wouldn't have been my personal choice. But overall, I'm impressed with the movie. I think I like what Zack Snyder's doing. I like what the creative team is doing. It got me into the DC extended universe. I'm all in for the rest of the movies that they're making.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the feeling I came out was quite similar. I mean, like you said, it's quite a lot to take in this movie, and after two and a half hours, I think whatever the running time was, I was a little out of breath even to talk about it. I think
exactly.
It was good after a day or two to sit and process it and think about it, and obviously seeing the responses from other people. Retrospectively, when you look at the movie, starts to change your opinions of it. But I think coming out of it, I enjoyed it. I mean, there was no points in the movie me sitting there, I was bored, or it was as you said, there's a few things where I kind of sniggered to myself or whatever it was, because something very lame or something that was way too comic book movie-ish. I know it sounds weird, even though it was, but the overall feeling was very positive. I walked out of it I got what I wanted. There were cheesy parts and there were some silly stuff where you think story-wise makes very little sense. But maybe it was more down to the editing and how how the film was cut up and stuff. But I did enjoy it, and I think what's good also is chatting about after a while is I think it's easy to get also wrapped up in the experience of the movie and the movie itself. So that's also what I want to
hype and
because as an experience thing, you're taking into account the hype of it and how long you've waited and all that. And then the movie itself just adds to that or detracts from that, I guess. Do you think you enjoyed it more because of the whole experience and the hype and how long we've waited to see this, or do you think you can fairly rate the movie on its own merits?
I think it actually went both ways, to be honest. I think the parts that I really enjoyed, parts of the Superman and the Batman fight in his armored suit, a couple of the shots, maybe some of Wonder Woman stuff. I think that stuff actually, after 3 years of waiting for this movie and then eventually seeing kind of the entire thing unfold, that was super positive. And then I think the parts where
have those those fanboy giddy moments when you look at them, even if it's a cheesy shot or whatever.
Exactly.
It was just so cool to see, the Trinity standing there, or actually seeing Batman, Superman throwing down. But I hear what you mean.
Yeah. And then I think for the negative parts, it was also kind of because I'd built the movie up in my own head as sort of this event, this almost once in a lifetime kind of thing. When a couple of the things did fall flat, I feel like they may have hit a little harder than they would have if it was just kind of an average, I don't know, buddy cop movie or whatever, and it's something cheesy and you laugh it off. With this, it felt a little like they maybe missed an opportunity to raise the quality of the movie a little bit, and I would have preferred if everything worked seamlessly and flawlessly.
Yeah, that's like it's interesting. Like sometimes I'm a bit more forgiving at like some of the
Yeah, I know what you mean.
not because I'm like, oh, I waited so long and I want to like this movie so much. You know what I mean? I really want to like it. So I'm like, when there's a silly plot point or something stupid, I'm like, oh, I can be a bit forgiving. But on the flip side of it, as you said, like we've waited so long for this, and there's such hardcore fan base behind this stuff that when something goes wrong, it's like real cringe moment because you're like,
Yeah.
so much planning, and there's been so many bad Batman movies and bad Superman movies that you think like they can't do this again, or
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
like you said, these movies are like these event movies. It's like they transcend beyond the 2.5 hours on the screen. It's all about the hype and all about everything. But I think
The perception.
I mean, I also maybe built it up in my head, as you said, like quite a lot. But I think maybe that was because of like I found the trailers were we had this chat before, but the trailers were, I think, way too revealing of what was in it. And I guess like marketing's hard, but like I think the way they did it wasn't the best. I think that the Batman vs Superman stuff already would have sold the film. I don't think they needed to have chucked Doomsday in there and chucked Wonder Woman in there, because I think seeing that on screen for the first time would have been pretty rare.
Way significant. Yeah, I agree with that completely, because I think the first time that Batman and Superman are on screen together is one thing. Then you add Wonder Woman, you add the fact that it's Zack Snyder. There are a lot of elements drawing people to the movie, and even if they're people that hate Zack Snyder, it's got its own kind of aura around it that people want to experience. You had enough appealing stuff and enough to attract an audience already without having to give away kind of like, in my mind, a massive sort of character point and a massive plot point.
Yeah.
I'm sure as soon as a lot of people saw Doomsday, if they're vaguely familiar with the comics and vaguely familiar with Superman's biggest and most popular stories, the first thing that popped into their heads was death of Superman.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of positive word of mouth could also have been generated by leaving Doomsday out of trailers, because then a lot of people, as soon as they came out of that movie, the first thing they were going to tweet, the first thing they were going to say, the first thing they were going to think about and discuss amongst themselves was, holy shit, we just saw Doomsday on screen.
Yeah.
Instead of like, oh, we saw that guy from the trailer.
And I think that's it, because like it seems like, I mean, we'll go. I guess maybe we can chat a bit about like what we did and didn't like more specifically. But it seems like DC they like blowing all their big secrets too soon, because they try that, whether that's that Hollywood Marvel DC rivalry exists or not. I mean, from what I understand, they have quite a good relationship, those two companies. But like, if they are playing catch up with Marvel, they're doing it like they're blowing all their good stuff first. Like obviously this movie put a lot of stuff in it to try, fast track the Justice League kind of storyline, and also throwing in a massive villain like that. I mean, surely there was like, it could have been paced out a little bit better, maybe, or maybe Doomsday could have popped up in a second standalone Man of Steel sequel or whatever it was. But it seems like they're throwing everything in the kitchen sink into the trailers to lure everyone, when these characters already will. The box office numbers probably would have been the same whether Doomsday did or didn't didn't pop up in that trailer. And like, I genuinely believe that. So I don't know if it's pressure from like the DC mothership or whoever's pulling the strings to push Zack Snyder to do that, because he is a director who keeps like quite a lot of stuff under wraps until movies hit the cinema. But so I guess that was like that did take a little bit like the wind out of the sails for me, is watching it, piecing together the movie in my head based on the footage I'd seen from the trailers. And I hate doing that, but unfortunately, it's a reality.
It's an actual reflex. I'll do it. Yeah, I agree. I think that like there was an element of, from what I gather, watching the story, the number of kind of, not necessarily side characters. I don't think Wonder Woman's a side character, but at the same time, I don't think she necessarily needed to be in the movie. Neither did Doomsday. If they made the storyline a little more focused, a little more linear, and just completely based on the dynamic between Lex Luthor, Batman, and Superman, I think it would have gotten a better reception from audiences and critics, just because it didn't seem like they were trying to put 100 threads into the same movie to hopefully launch an entire kind of extended universe.
Yeah. And I think it's funny, like, this movie actually, it reminded me of Amazing Spider-Man 2, just by the sheer amount of stuff that was, like, going in it. And I had that same feeling while watching that. Like, it's cool to see all these characters, leading up to Sinister Six or leading up to Justice League or whatever it may be. But it's also like, sometimes I want to see that character in the next movie. Like, lay it out for me. So there's that. I think this movie made me think a lot about like the process of like the fans go through while waiting for these movies, and that I think the hype around like will X and Y appear, who's the villain, is like part of the fun as like the years go on. Is like part of the experience of going to see them. I feel like they've laid it out almost, or particularly with this one, they put so like there was no real like curveball that was going to come in this movie. And it was disappointing because in the last, I guess, like the last month of the marketing kind of push for this movie, they hyped up the Batman-Superman rivalry so hard. It was funny because they'd already revealed Doomsday, so like even the casual fans who don't know the story and how they obviously team up again, obviously to go against Doomsday, they even were like, oh, but obviously either's not going to die, So it was a weird like marketing messaging from Hollywood, but I guess that's kind of like, in the age of the internet and stuff, this is unfortunately like part of the deal. You almost have to you have to blindfold yourself to not see these kind of things. But
it's everywhere. It's everywhere. You pretty much have to go like on an internet blackout 6 months before release if you want to make sure that you don't get hit with like a massive spoiler.
Yeah, exactly.
I also feel like the trailers were definitely, depending on which one you look at, marketed at different audiences.
Yeah.
The first Comic-Con trailer and the last trailer, I feel like, were a little bit more aimed at the fans. But the Doomsday trailer the first two trailers seemed like they were aimed at fans, and the last two trailers seemed like they were completely aimed at general audience.
Yeah, it's just to learn those like fence sitters about like to sell them on this.
Try and get
idea. Because like I had a lot of like casual friends say like, oh my god, Batman vs Superman, like what are they going to make up next? And I was like, it's actually like a string of comic books. It's not like they're making up these things. These things are things that exist in the lore of DC, and so there are people, and these are people who I would say are like casual to high Marvel fans, whatever. So like there were fence sitters. People didn't understand, and I think like DC and Warner Brothers had to like throw the kitchen sink to lure them in that, oh, there is this giant monster that they're both going to fight. Then suddenly it gets people off that, Batman vs Superman is like a stupid idea train.
Concept. Yeah, because a lot of people I think were skeptical. I don't think it's necessarily a story most people necessarily have much interest in, because the knee-jerk reflex kind of response from a lot of people is, well, obviously Superman would just kill Batman. Kind of like, it's true if you're talking about just stacking up their abilities next to one another, but it's not exactly about that.
And there's a lot more to the story, and I think that's the problem, is that it felt like it almost made people feel like it was like one of those like Boa versus Python or like Mega Croc versus Crocozilla movies or whatever, where like it creates this, it almost looks like a B grade, like, oh my god, what's next? Like Plants vs Zombies or Scouts vs Zombies or one of those movies. So I think like they had to do that, unfortunately, but like I don't know. Dude, marketing's hard, and like I guess it would have been the natural thing for everyone. And I'm sure a guy like Zack Snyder, who digs DC stuff, would have said, guys, like we're blowing it by putting in Doomsday, and they, the corporate slammed the fist and said it has to be, and blah blah blah. So, but I guess sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think one of the interviews I recently saw with Snyder said that he said in the interview that he wanted to have a 3-hour cut, which is this 3-hour R-rated extended edition that's coming out soon. So I think, like you were mentioning about kind of there being goals for the studio and goals for the director. I think if Snyder had his way, those trailers probably would have been cut a lot differently and would have shown a lot less content maybe from the movie.
Yeah, and I think like I actually can't wait for that. Like I've found with some of the other ones, the director's cuts are always better, and they're always like they are always longer and sometimes a bit drawn out because guys are creative visionaries or whatever. But I think it'll always be better, and I think that I'm quite excited to actually see what Snyder's actual plan was. Because I mean, what this movie bordered it on 2 hours 40 minutes. I mean, if they pushed another 20, it was long, but I mean, it wouldn't have. I don't know. I think I'd be interested to see it, like why the editing decisions were made.
Yeah. I think I saw a couple of commentators. I think maybe film critics or journalists that have seen the 3-hour cuts, and a lot of them said that it adds a lot more rationale and a lot more logic to some of the decisions that the characters made in the movie because you're given just extra context and extra information. So it doesn't seem like such a leap for character X to do this to character Y if you've got a bit more backstory to it. So yeah, I think it's going to change a lot. And I know with Watchmen, Snyder had an extended edition as well that people also said was an improvement on the theatrical cut.
Okay. Well, I get that's actually like what. Okay, so let's talk about like what speaking about like what why characters had motivations and stuff. I guess let's talk about the good first. Like, what did you think was cool in the movie, and what aspects of it did you like?
I think.
And I guess we can go into like spoiler territory now. I think it's safe to say. So if anyone is listening to this and you haven't seen the movie, and
you don't want to be spoiled, then maybe rather pause this.
Maybe pause it, or I mean, if you don't care and you just want to hear about it, listen. But if you've seen the movie and you want to hear what we thought about it, we're giving you a 3-second time to evade. So it's over. That's going in. So what did you dig about the movie, like plot-wise, character-wise, actor-wise, all that kind of stuff?
I think one of the first things that I thought was really good about it was the fact that they're exploring the consequences of Man of Steel. So the movie this is the sequel to. I like that fact. I like the fact that they're not glossing over the fact that two superpowered beings tore down some buildings and caused severe casualties. They're analyzing that aspect. So having a follow-up to Man of Steel, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, I like that because I think there was obviously a huge, I don't want to call it a backlash, but a lot of the critical reception after Man of Steel was like, oh, how can Superman cause all this? How can he do this? But obviously this is I think you mentioned earlier, like this is a darker take on the DC universe, and there are consequences for people having these powers and doing what they do. And I like that they didn't push it under the rug with this movie and say now there's no casualties because people didn't like that in Man of Steel. I like that was the focus of. I saw an interview with Snyder where they said, was the plot, this plot of Superman dealing with the repercussions of that, was that a reaction to the response from Man of Steel, or was it always the plan? And he said, like a little bit of both, but he liked, he took that fan feedback also into like some of the comments people made and stuff. And you can actually see that like show up in the movie, like the skeptics are almost the fans of Man of Steel who are like questioning. We thought Superman was supposed to be this idol and this image of like perfection and what humans should strive for and blah blah blah, and he's literally just ripped apart our entire city and blown up a machine that was pancaking us. And so I like that was kind of like the mechanism to get the ball rolling in this movie.
I like it. I think a lot of people sort of criticize the fact that there was the level of destruction and the level of action and the level of almost like reckless abandon with the fights at the end of Man of Steel. But I also have to say that there's this tendency with comic book movies at large at the moment to kind of idealize the stories that they're showing us.
And a lot of them also because they're, like all the big fight scenes will happen like always in a very convenient place, and like we'll talk about something about this movie around that just now, but like everything is pushed to a safe zone, and they don't want to take the risk of like racking up the collateral damage and the body count and blah blah blah. And I like that this movie was like, if two superheroes were fighting in a populated city, this is what would happen.
Yeah, yeah. Like I can understand for some people that movies are escapist and they'd prefer to just sort of have this cool, streamlined, fun, slick story. But at the same time, I think for people that might want to explore a slightly more realistic or a slightly more grounded perspective or take on superheroes, I think this will kind of give that audience what they want. It's not, it's not all sunshine and daisies with a story, and that might appeal to some people, it might not. But personally, I'm a big fan of that perspective. Can't say I'd want it for like every movie necessarily, but I do enjoy that DC are doing it with their characters and their properties.
And that's the thing, is like a lot of people also are, on this like age-old Marvel versus DC thing, and people say, oh, this is cool because it's darker and it's gritty and it's serious. Marvel's too jokey and there's too many, puns but like I think there's a middle ground where I enjoy living in a world where both of them exist. Like I like the tone Marvel have for their movies, and their comic books have always kind of been that like a bit of tongue-in-cheek humor amongst the chaos. But I do like this other side of the coin, and I mean there's a bit of humor in this movie, but it's very
subtle. It's
throughout the film, like Jeremy Irons' Alfred, who's flipping awesome. Like he has some good, some good little chirps here and there, but I do like that it's a darker take, because I don't think this is that super bright, super happy movie. Because like at the end of the day, the tone of this movie and the like subject matter is quite dark. I mean, like especially following on from Man of Steel, it's not like they're not going to be cracking jokes throughout the movie about the devastation that was caused. So
and so I think they deserve, Zack Snyder, the creative team, they deserve the right to kind of explore this material the way they'd like. The fans or the critics or the comic book genre at large, they don't own these characters. They don't really set the rules. They kind of create a precedent, but people should feel free to explore the stories in a different way if they feel like doing it.
No, I completely agree. I think like, and he did that, and also like, I mean, visually he did that in a really nice way. Like a lot of people are, aren't too happy about this kind of blue kind of haze. He put something. Yes, but I think consciously and purposely to create that dark mood. You almost feel like in those dark rain sequences, you feel like you're in that scenario. Yeah. I think he did. Like, I mean, from like a visual standpoint, I thought this movie was, I thought it was like spectacular. I mean, I think it's visually barring maybe one or other two films out there, it's probably the most visually spectacular movie I've ever seen from a CGI standpoint, and from just some of the shots he did with the IMAX camera. I mean, I never saw it in IMAX, but you could see when the aspect ratio popped out a bit. And, I just thought it was awesome. Like, and a lot of it, there was a lot. I mean, obviously it's a super CG heavy movie, but there was a lot of practical stuff that was very cool with the Batmobile and how they did a lot of that stuff. So like, I think like kudos to Snyder for not half-assing this. He definitely like full-assed this one, which was I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think actually you were mentioning like which positives I would take out of the movie. I would say the cinematography and the kind of the visual, his aptitude for visual narrative, for like visual storytelling, I think is the best part. A lot of these scenes looked like they were comic book frames or comic book panels that they'd put in motion. It looked it's very stylized. I'll give people that. If that's not their thing, that's fair enough. It might be an acquired taste, but overall it looked. I think maybe that's what contributed to my feeling after the movie of never having seen anything like that before. Is the cinematography I think is uncommon. It's very, very unique to Zack Snyder and the cinematographers he likes to use. It's something you don't really see that frequently, and I enjoy that departure.
Yeah, he has such a cool, unique style. And like he also in another interview, I think he was saying, a lot of people are saying, oh, he's all style over substance and he blah blah blah. But he said like at the end of the day, he wants to make the stuff look cool. And I thought that was quite like honest of a director and quite a nice way of saying it, because like some of them, they sugarcoat everything and try to give all these deep reasons for why the film looks like X and Y, and he just said, I want it to look cool because, the source material is cool. Like, this stuff looks cool. That's why people fall in love with comic books, Obviously, they have great storylines, but at the end of the day, they are beautiful, stylistic, awesome action sequences put into print. And he's bringing that to film, with his own visual style to it. But I think, that's why, everything just looks cool. Like, when Batman puts on that armor, and when, the Batmobile slides into the wall, and when whatever happens, it just looks cool, So I think, at the end of the day, we do want a bit more, but also this thing has to look good. If it doesn't look good, we might have a Batman and Robin kind of campy, silly Tim Burton kind of reboot kind of a thing, So I think I like the way he went all out for it, and I liked, it's CG heavy. There's a lot of green screen and stuff, but there's also a lot of real world stuff, which is cool. And it's not really jarring when they jump from the locations to which you can clearly see as a green screen battleground or whatever. Kind of you just roll with the punches, a bit of suspension of disbelief. But and I think other stuff that stood out for me, I'll definitely say Ben Affleck. I think he's kind of stole the show. As many people were dubious about his casting, he, in my mind, is the quintessential Batman. He's a Batman that I would always familiarize myself with. I think there's obviously a lot of iterations of Batman, but I thought that dark, bitter guy who unleashes his own brand of justice was always Batman in my mind, and I think he definitely did that. And I'm excited to see him take that role further and find out about all the events that preceded this movie, and
there was a lot of foreshadowing in a couple of Easter eggs of kind of what's happened to this Batman.
The rock costume and all of that stuff. And I think he, as Bruce Wayne, he was very James Bondy and suave, but he almost kept in Batman character, when the scene of them chatting at Lex's fundraiser thing. His cynicism around Gotham and around crime and stuff. I thought he conveyed that, whereas not to bash Christian Bale or compare it because they're very different movies, but you never got that real Bruce Wayne sense in a lot of those movies. He kind of hand in his pocket, smiling at the party, and I like that. As much as he tried to hide his identity as Batman, he still was Bruce Wayne, who was pissed off at the world and angry at everything like that. And then I thought he brought a physicality. Also, he looked like a beast.
Guy's huge. He's a tall dude. He's a broad guy. They got him into insane shape for the movie. He's quite a beast. So,
and that's just when he puts on that armor, when he stands toe to toe with Superman, even though it's Superman, you kind of buy that he could kind of give a few punches here and there, So I thought there's clear commitment to the role. I don't think he's definitely silenced the critics and. Cool. I don't think he did show a little bit of a different side to Man of Steel, but I don't think the script was too flattering for himself. Too much to work off. He conveyed a lot of stuff, the drama side of stuff quite well. Like I said, Jeremy Irons was flipping awesome. I really enjoyed him as Alfred. He wasn't this normal Alfred carrying a tray of tea around Bruce Wayne. He was kind of gives him a bit of stick and gives him a bit of back chat here and there, and I really like that. And I think Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor is quite an interesting discussion. I don't know what you thought of him.
Yeah, I watched the Superman 78 movie. I watched Superman Returns. I grew up on the animated series, so I'm used to Lex Luthor being a relatively older, somewhat imposing, bald guy. But at the same time, the spirit of the character is really, he's a manipulative and self-obsessed psychopath that thinks Superman has too much power and he wants to remove him. Did Jesse Eisenberg bring that across? Hell yes, he did. It might not have been, in the package everybody is used to, but I'm not comparing the quality of the performances necessarily, but it's a similar thing to Heath Ledger's Joker. It's people made complaints about his makeup. It looks like it's just some dude that put white base on his face with lipstick and it's not permanent, and all these complaints. And it's kind of yeah, sure, it doesn't look exactly like how you used to, but is he getting the spirit of the character right? Does he seem like he has the same motivations as the previous iterations of those characters? I'd say Jesse Eisenberg did a very good job, and I'd say I'd take him more seriously just by virtue of the tone of the movie and how he delivered his performance than I take Gene Hackman in the old Donner movies.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, like, because him saying that he's not exactly the way he appeared in the comics. So I think that's like what people need to kind of, or I assumed at this point of these superhero movies, the age of these superhero movies, people would come to terms with, is that some of that stuff doesn't transcend from the comic book page to the cinema, verbatim so nice, because they will look stupid and they will look silly. And also, I guess everyone was expecting a stern, bald-headed, cold, clinical, calculating Lex Luthor, but actually, I felt like, given the tone of the movie and that Batman was a very dark toned character, and Superman was very disgruntled and having his own internal battle in this movie, it actually needed a bit of like just light-hearted, I wouldn't say light-hearted humor, but light-hearted kind of projection from some character to just break the tension. And like that scene where Lex's fundraiser, and he pops in and says, "Oh, Clark Kent meets Bruce Wayne."
Like that little, it's almost like this little jab at the full.
Perfectly, yeah. It was was like its own little climate of the movie, and I think like he as weirdly toned as he was, because he was pretty bizarre. Like when he was having that meltdown during his speech and stuff, it was quite a refreshing take from the stern one-liners that everyone was throwing around. I mean, that was awesome, but it was cool having a guy who was saying things that were so bizarre and in such a weird, almost like a cracky, faint tone, that he was this weird like character in the background that was the puppet master pulling all the strings. And like, I thought Jesse Eisenberg was a very bold move to take that risk, but I think like it paid off massively. And as you said, I'm excited now to see where he goes with that. And obviously he's like completely unhinged and batshit crazy by the end. So it's now making him, I think, more of a menacing villain, because he obviously has nothing holding him back, and he's completely detached from reality and from who he was before. I think that's exciting, because there's nothing holding him back. He's not still this like guy who's pretending to be this businessman that secretly hates Batman on the side. He's completely now full on fucking dedicated to taking out these two. So I like that aspect. You could see he had kind of like daddy issues. Because I mean, the people are speaking like saying he's not Lex Luthor, he's Alexander Luthor, but like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but in my mind, he's Lex Luthor in this movie. Like, there's
I mean, I think that was a small conceit, maybe on the part of Snyder or the creative team, to sort of give people an excuse to detach themselves from their old perceptions of Lex Luthor. But I mean, he is supposed to be, and he is.
And he is, and I think that's like he is, and I think it's quite a cool take. Everyone's always disappointed that it's not like verbatim to the comic book, what they wanted. But I think it's cool, and I think in the sense of this movie, it was needed. There was needed to be that wild card character, because otherwise it would have been all doom and gloom throughout the movie. And he brought a bit of like sensibility to like the tone of the movie, and reminded you that like this is a comic book movie, because it did get quite dark at like quite a lot of points, that I think it needed a bit of an injection of like bizarreness or whatever. So I thought he was really cool.
Fiction, like otherwise it was too much of a dramatic really character cool study.
And yeah, I mean, the Lois Lane actress just
Amy Adams,
I know Amy Adams was cool. I mean, she didn't have a lot to kind of work with, but she showed like another side of her, and also quite a dislikable side of her, which I thought was quite cool. When that military general, ex-military general, has a bit of a chat with her and saying like, she's kind of pushing the boundaries of the questions she's asking, and kind of a bit biased towards Superman and stuff like that. I thought that was quite a cool. And Lawrence Fishburne's rad. Obviously, I enjoy him as Perry White.
I like a lot of the dialogue that he has with Clark. I think it's funny. He's that hard ass boss. He's he brings like a bit of an edge to the character, which is cool. It's
Yeah, and he had some like fourth wall breaking moments, when he was like, "Where the hell is that Clark Kent?" or whatever, and then
yeah, yeah, it's kind of like this little wink at you. Yeah,
and cinema looks at each other, and everyone like winks and has a giggle, and like and also when he was like, "No one cares about Clark Kent taking on the Batman," and
yeah,
Clark, it's not 1939 anymore, it's the age of the internet or whatever, which was like
yeah.
a little Easter egg for when I think the first Batman issue came out, or one of
Yeah, like a little historical Easter egg.
so I think that was quite cool, and and it didn't take you out of the cinema, like out of the experience or anything. I think so let's chat about what you didn't like.
So I think one of the things that might be a little tough for a general audience goer, and that was a little for me, not maybe tough to follow the story, but it was a little jarring, is the editing in the first hour of the movie. You kind of get 4 separate storylines unfolding at the same time. It goes from one scene of Bruce Wayne to one scene of Clark Kent to one scene of Wonder Woman to one scene of Lex, and then you kind of do that little rotation.
It's funny when you actually mention it, because as we were talking about Perry White, the one scene, he's like, where the hell is Kent? He's never here. And then you think like the natural thing would be to show like where Superman is.
What Clark Kent's doing.
And it cuts to a scene of Batman, and then it cuts to a scene of Lois Lane, and then eventually Superman pops up. And it was a bit like, surely the natural thing would be to just show where he was, or I don't know. So like, I hear what you're saying about that.
The editing, it's kind of, look, I think I'm pretty forgiving when it comes to this. A lot of people aren't, and that's fine. That's good. I mean, there are filmmaking conventions for a reason. It needs to be kind of streamlined and easy to follow. I think in the first hour, there's a good argument for the editing being a little untidy and possibly not doing a good enough job of showing the audience how the story unfolds. They definitely could have improved there, I think.
Yeah, I agree. The editing was a bit jarring, and like you said, it started off. It had this like it started off. I thought that first scene of Bruce Wayne driving through Metropolis was awesome. Like, what a great way to kick off the movie. And then it hit this like sweet spot where like the editing was okay, and then it got really weird for a while, and also just jumping locations too fast. I mean, I'm sure even for you, like a big DC fan, and me, a guy who I think I could say I'm strongly familiar with this stuff. I even was like, I don't know, why are we in Africa now? Is this Gotham? Is this Metropolis? Why are we in this room? It was quite jarring. A lot of that.
Yeah.
And that's why I think I'm quite excited for that Zack Snyder edit. I mean, I think it's long, but I think it actually I hope will kind of be a bit more coherent than the way this thing was all laid out.
Yeah, and I think a few of those storylines could have been chopped completely, maybe, and a couple of them felt like they really needed maybe a minute or two longer in the scene, just to give you a bit more information about the relevance or the significance.
Yeah, a little bit of context, and that's like we chatted about this the other day. That new, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's on MenStuff and it's on YouTube now. That additional scene of Lex in Genesis Chamber speaking to one of the new villains that's going to come out, and it's obviously sits chronologically probably during or at the end of the fight with Doomsday, before he's thrown in prison in his head. Yet it was cut out of the movie, and it was like it made more sense than half of the other stuff in there. Like there's that scene with Superman. I guess it was emotional juncture, but him on top of Mount Everest, I assume it was, speaking to the ghost of his father. Cool, and it had that like emotional touch to it, but their conversation was completely unnecessary, and it lingered a little bit too long, and there was just these weird scenes that like you think rather like the important story point of like how, because the question at the end of the movie was, how does Lex now know he is coming, and how does he why is he so cooked off his rock enough? Like that scene would have given all that context and provided those answers. So there was a few weird editing choices. I guess like I don't know, maybe too many cooks in the kitchen with this kind of thing. Too many producers and I don't know, too many people consulting on the movie, and DC Comics guys also apparently were involved. So I don't know, maybe too many people in the kitchen rather than one person dictating how this should go. Um, So yeah, I guess the editing was weird, and I guess the other thing that kind of it doesn't usually bother me in these kind of movies that like I guess we're all used to this like the suspension of disbelief where you're like oh there's an easy solution to the problem that's on screen, and you're like why doesn't like when Batman and Superman are about to fight because Lex has Superman's mom. When Superman dropped down, yes, he did kind of try to talk to Batman before they went head to head, but why don't he just say, Lex has my mom, please come help me? You know what I mean? Like, and you think the whole thing would have been avoided. Instead, they have this moment where they realize they have the same mom, their moms have the same name, and it usually doesn't bother me, those kind of things, but it got like more and more ridiculous as the movie went on, like, there were so many instances of it, but
and
I think that was kind of like, there was this weird, like, strange, shoehorned mechanisms to make characters do things, like we were speaking about earlier. So they're like, we need Batman and Superman to fight. Let's make them just have terrible verbal skills so that they have to punch each other in the face for a while. Where it could have been like something a lot bigger stake, maybe, or something that forced them into going against each other, or maybe if Batman was the one who. If Lex made it look like Batman was the one who had his mom and framed him, and then obviously it would give them both incentive to go each other. I don't know. There seemed to be like a disconnect with why characters were doing things.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's trying to have a symbolic kind of thematic study of these two characters, like an analysis and almost a deconstruction of their character, and then trying to reconcile that with just your normal blockbuster fun action movie. And I think when you just basically take both ingredients and jam them together in no particular order, you get some weird sort of disjointed moments on screen that just pull a lot of audience members like out of the movie. So maybe at a symbolic and metaphoric level, a couple of the things work, like when young Bruce he falls down the well or into the cave, and the bats sort of form around him, and he elevates out of the cave. Like, a lot of people I've heard kind of thought, is this really happening? Is it is he dreaming? I think that kind of symbolic visual metaphor, maybe you don't necessarily put that in, or maybe you do it in a slightly different way. And yeah, like you were saying, a couple of the conceits to get the characters to do what it is that they need to do, like for Batman and Superman to fight, or for Lex to be seen as the villain, they seem a little, almost like it's too on the nose and too obvious that they were designed to create a certain effect. It wasn't very organic necessarily.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
Yeah, like I think some of the writing needed to maybe be a little more polished, just to seem like the character motivations made complete sense in that universe, in the internal world that they were moving through. I mean, again, I'm really forgiving when it comes to that kind of stuff. I think I get so pulled into the movie, I just sort of accept as it comes. A lot of viewers have sharper eyes and sharper ears than I do, and they're paying attention to the logic very closely.
Yeah.
A couple of those sort of key plot points do come off a little forced.
Yeah, well, that's like I was saying. I guess that suspension of disbelief. Some people are constantly shaking their head, going, "Oh, that would never happen."
That would never happen. Yeah.
I'm extremely forgiving, and like as it did grow in this movie, like it got harder and harder to suspend that disbelief. It didn't ruin it for me. I still really enjoyed it. There were some things that I think, like retrospectively, sitting looking at it, I was like, "Oh yeah, that part was a bit silly, or that was a bit dumb." But like in the cinema, I must say, I wasn't thinking that. It was kind of, I mean, besides the 1 or 2 moments, I was like, "This is cool. I'm on board. I don't care kind of why that was weird, but I'll think about that later." And I mean, like the action was like unbelievable. I thought.
I thought it was very well done.
Zack Snyder just has a knack for filming great action scenes, and I think that's what comes down to what we were saying earlier about how he just wants to make things look cool. And I think that's like sometimes he will sacrifice the complicated choreography for something that just looks really cool. And I think sometimes you just want to see, like, the Batman vs Superman fight, the armored fight was like, that was what I'd waited for. That was everything that lived up to me for my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, same. I thought,
And the scene of that was just unbelievable. I thought, like, when he hits Superman down and they're kind of fighting through that warehouse, throwing each other through the walls. I mean, it was like that.
oh yeah,
It
yeah,
was short-lived. I mean, it lasted what it was, like 3 minutes maybe or so. But it was worth waiting those 3-4 years for. And then the Batman scene following that, when he takes out the henchmen in the
the
warehouse.
thugs in the warehouse.
I mean, that was like
Yeah.
that was the best Batman. I thought the best solo Batman action scene filmed to date. Like, better than people might slam me for it, but I thought better than the fight scenes in the Dark Knight trilogy. It was just the grappling hook to the roof, throwing the smoke pellet, flipping the box, kicking that guy in the face. It was that, like, super badass, and he was getting shot, he was getting stabbed. It was just like. So I think, like, Ben Affleck brought a cool physicality to the movie that was needed from that Batman. And it was just that, like, grungy, gritty, noir, like, fighting in a warehouse, kicking boxes. Like, it was a really cool old, like, Batman animated series kind of fight that we wanted to see.
Yeah, that was what I was just about to bring up. Is kind of like a lot of people, when they think of Batman's fighting style, the first things they're going to think about are either the animated series, or if they're a little younger and, like, even our age, because we've played the games, the Arkham games.
Yes.
That's how you think of Batman action. I think Snyder completely translated that onto film, like,
Completely.
110%. It's not even close for me that that's easily the best Batman in action sequence in terms of the stylistic elements that we're used to. It definitely is one of the best. And I think a lot of people gave Ben Affleck a lot of flack when he was first cast. He deserves major credit for bringing pretty much, I mean, arguably for some people, the best representation of Batman in live action.
I've always been a fan of Affleck, even some of his, like, not so well received movies. I was always kind of on board with him, and I knew he would deliver, because, like, a lot of people think back to, like, Daredevil or whatever, and they say, oh, Affleck's not such a great actor, but people forget, Argo and things like that he's done. These, like, amazing films in the last couple of years, and he's become an amazing writer, actor, and director. So, I don't think they would cast him if just because he kind of looked like Bruce Wayne. He obviously, like, tried out for it, and he definitely brought it, like, in terms of. I mean, you forget he's Ben Affleck when he's having those moments, and he. That scene where Alfred is kind of questioning him why what he stole from Lex, and kind of what's going on, why does he want to go to war with Superman, and then he
gives it 1%.
And it was literally just like he completely sold the intention of the character. I thought Batman was, like, the main character who his motives and why he was doing things wasn't questionable to me. Some of the other characters, like, due to the writing or the script or whatever it was, were like, why is Superman doing that? Why is Lois Lane going there? But, like, Batman, I was like, he's made it very clear what he's doing, and Ben Affleck sold it, like, 100%. So
I think people need to remember. No, sorry, you go ahead, dude.
No, you go. What you saying?
No, I was going to say, like, a lot of people need to remember kind of the spirit of Batman's character is, despite the fact that he kind of goes a little ham on the thugs and is arguably responsible for quite a few deaths in this movie. The point of his character is actually to preserve human life. He sees Superman as a threat that can kind of eliminate all human life on Earth if things were to go in that direction. And he decides to take it into his own hands because he has the ability and the resources to do so, to make sure that doesn't happen. His motivations, as far as how they were happening in that universe, were pretty clear. They're a little contradictory with how he handles himself with some of the henchmen, but then it's also arguable that if somebody's trying to take your life and they happen to die in the process of doing so, it's self-defense. I think
they've broken that duck already in a good way. I mean, with Man of Steel, because it's not going to be when Superman's getting thrown through a building or Batman's destroying the streets with his Batmobile, there's not going to be no deaths. Like, there are going to be there's collateral damage or whatever the case. I mean, Batman doesn't kill anyone innocent in this movie, not that I can remember, but this is grounded kind of in reality. This is a superhero movie, it's a comic book hero, and there's certain precedents they have to meet, I guess, in terms of like living up to the character's origins and what they stand for. But like, it actually, you know, when he busts through with his Batmobile and crushed that first car, I was thinking that guy may have died, and then he like
that guy's probably like dead as fuck.
And then slams it into the other corner, blows up, and I'm like, okay, that guy's probably dead. And it actually, not that I liked the death, but it actually enhanced it a bit for me because it made me understand how on the edge Batman actually is in this movie. And I think like it made me excited for Suicide Squad and for, you know, the talks of this Batman solo movie to actually understand the lengths that he went through and the stuff he went through to get to this point. So like, in my mind, it got me excited for the rest, and that's like, I guess before we go into that point, I was just going to say, like, let's chat quickly about the backlash around this movie. Like, is there a conspiracy against Zack Snyder, or like, what's going on, dude?
I don't think there's a conspiracy. I think there's a stigma against him. I think he takes on very ambitious projects. A lot of the time, a lot of people said, you know, when he adapted Watchmen, that he completely missed the point, and you know, he didn't tap into the inherent sort of satire and parody that you know, Alan Moore and Frank Miller were trying to put across with that movie. And I think he's just got this perception as he almost has a Michael Bay level of disdain from a lot of people, which I think is undeserved, and I'm not precisely sure where it comes from. I also think that a lot of people have very, very strong preconceived notions about how Superman conducts himself on film, how Batman conducts himself, and how they saw this movie panning out. And I think in a lot of senses, in terms of the story, in terms of character motivation, in terms of the visual style, it was a massive departure from what people were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you hype a movie up in your own head, like, I mean, I'm completely guilty of this myself. When you put almost so much you know, of your time and energy into following a movie and hoping to God that it's the most amazing thing you've ever seen, I think when your expectation and the final product are so far removed as it might have been for some people, not the logical reaction necessarily, but the way I can explain it is that people have to just aim vitriol at it, aim kind of like a lot of hate at it. I mean, the Rotten Tomatoes score, even though I don't pay any attention to it, I think it's very relevant at all for me personally, is sitting at possibly the lowest of any comic book movie besides maybe like Jonah Hex or you know, like another like abject flop. And it's I mean, objectively, I think if you absolutely hate every aspect of this movie, then it's maybe like a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10. But for the way the critics have handled this, the way that a lot of fans have become completely hyperbolic with their criticisms, I just don't see that as being reasonable or realistic. I think this needs to cool down for a while, and then people can go back to it, and then it might be a little more reasonable. But at the moment, it's just, I think people have gone full froth at the mouth, like flinging feces at the wall, just crazy about it.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, is like these characters are so close to people's hearts, and they, you know, exactly. if it's not exactly what they wanted, they flip out about it. But I think that's kind of the beauty of like why people like comic books and fall in and out of comic books, is that, you know, when new artists and writers take them over, it almost is a reimagining of what it's about, and a change. And, you know, some people love like the Dark Knight's spin-offs and the you know, old Batmans, or the Spectacular Spider-Man, and the new Marvel Universe, or the New 52 Justice League, whatever it is. I think that's part of the appeal of it. Like this, you know, all those Batman movies, the Christopher Nolan trilogy and the Tim Burton movies, and will always exist in history. Will always be there. And I think this, like, there's a place for this movie, and I think people must come to terms that this is a particular vision of these characters in this story. This is a lot of people think this is like the Bible of what Batman and Superman should be, and like Zack Snyder never said that's what it was. He said from the start, this is not going to be a movie for critics, it's going to be a movie for fans. And while the fans, given the box office numbers, I don't think the fans are as upset as some media publications want to make them look. I think it's the Rotten Tomatoes, it's the Telegraphs, it's the top tier, highbrow newspapers tearing apart the movie, and they always will. They'll always tear apart the Transformers and the whatever. But at the end of the day, people speak with their money, and like this movie, I think it broke 50 million at the box office first weekend. If I think that was the right number. I mean, it speaks for itself, and I think you summed it up quite nicely. That's my views on the backlash. Also, it's disheartening because I think for someone who puts Zack Snyder and everyone involved who put so much heart and soul into this movie and the actors to get to just be given such a poor reception by some publications, I think is a bit of a slap in the face, because clearly this is not a bad movie. There's no I mean, not maybe we're slightly biased, but there's no possible reality where this is a bad movie. There are things about it that aren't good, and we've described that, and we both said like it's definitely not perfect. But to give it a 1 star, or say I read a review, which I shouldn't do, that said it was the most simple-minded, boring superhero movie ever made. I mean that it's ridiculous. So I think that you summed it up quite nicely, and I think I guess people will just move on. And like Man of Steel, everyone threw their arms up in the air, but the movie actually is the more you watch it, people get into it, and people have kind of accepted. And I think this stuff takes quite a while to digest in terms of media. It's a very long movie, and it's very people need to wrap their heads around where DC's going with this. And I think that it seems like they're going to stick to their guns and keep this tone and this thing for the universe. And clearly, it's not going to change, because the reaction, the critical reaction to Man of Steel, as this movie got, didn't change this film. The tone is the same stakes of everything. So I think after all of that, are you more excited for Suicide Squad and the Justice League and Aquaman and everything going forward after this movie, or are you a bit more hesitant and kind of not apprehensive about it, but have different feelings for this?
Yeah, I'd say my excitement has either stayed the same as my hype levels were before this movie, if not maybe increased a little more, because I think I'm a Zack Snyder fan. I'm a fan of what he does. I recognize that he's got a style that's maybe a bit of an acquired taste. He's not perfect in any way, but I'm a big fan of his. So I'd like to see what he does going forward. At the same time, there's a lot of very good talent involved with the other movies. I think David Ayer is a fantastic director, and he's going to do amazing things for Suicide Squad. That looks like it's already almost a home run, even though we haven't seen that much. It looks fantastic. The guy that did a couple of the sort of Australian horror movies, like The Conjuring and that kind of stuff, I think James Wan is doing Aquaman. I'm very keen to see what his take on this is. Again, like the first time this is going to be on the silver screen in live action. Interested to see what happens there. Overall, I think the DC universe needs to have its own flavor, its own atmosphere. As long as there are talented people that are trying to make quality movies, I'm going to be 110% behind it. I really, really sincerely hope they don't listen to the vocal minority and try and change anything too drastically from the backlash that Batman v Superman has received. And I think by virtue of what I've seen on Twitter and just social media in general, there are a lot of people who overwhelmingly love this movie. Like, love this movie. They deserve to go in the direction that they feel like going in, and I'm going to enjoy the ride.
Well, that's really cool to hear, because I mean, from just stuff I've seen has been quite the opposite. And I mean, I have seen maybe a 50-50 split of love-hate, but that's
it's been intense on both sides.
Given that, like we said, this is not a bad movie. So
no.
I think this is maybe, like you said, maybe the same or even more excited for. I mean, Suicide Squad always had my attention from the get-go, and Justice League, I was interested in it. I'm more so now after seeing the the scope that Snyder is aiming for. And there was a moment, like, quickly we have to mention, like, when that nightmare scene, and just after it, when Flash came through that kind of time
portal.
portal, I guess you could call it, and it literally, like, that was a moment where I was like, oh shit, like, this is happening, this time travel stuff is being included. This, like, that opens up so many possibilities, and you as a DC fan knows probably way more than I do that, like, the timelines it opens up and the opportunities it does for, you know, for things to live beyond the Justice League and different spin-offs and stuff is, like, very exciting. So I'm super stoked about it, and I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed the ride. Actually, I definitely want to go watch this movie again.
Yeah. I think a lot of people that I've seen online have said that it gets better subsequent viewings because you've got a bit of experience with the story, so there's more opportunity for you to take in the details rather than try and follow the narrative.
And that's the thing. This movie is, like, full of those little nuances and things that I think are appreciated the more you watch it. And I was like that with Man of Steel. The first time I watched it, I loved it. I love Man of Steel, big fan, but I was quite overwhelmed, and I feel like I missed a lot, and I wasn't ready for the pace of the action that was there. And I think this will be the same. I think you go in there with, you know, retrospectively, all these, like, you know, you understand kind of what this movie is, and you go in looking at it, and I think you'll appreciate the level of filmmaking and the, you know, the score that was there, which was awesome, and all those little things that are, like, you're taking in quite a lot while watching this movie. But I think, like, it will get better next time, and well, every time we watch it, I'll definitely be checking out again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it again. Like you say, there are a lot of details that, again, it's maybe unfortunate for general audience members that aren't as familiar with the comic books. It might be a little inaccessible to them, which is a valid criticism. But for established fans, there's a lot of fan service in here and a lot of hints to opening up this universe, like you said, with Flash coming through like the cut or the tear in the space-time continuum, however you want to phrase it. That's stuff that a lot of fans have been wanting to see in live action for years and years and years. We finally got that. They're showing that they're very ambitious with kind of the scope, like you said, that they want to go for. I'm completely behind that. I think we need, you know, we're living in the golden generation of comic book movies. At one point, it's going to disappear. It's going to get unpopular again. We need to enjoy it while it's here.
I couldn't agree more, and I think, like, that's what will make people retrospectively enjoy these movies more, is that when that trend fades, and I think it will, because I think superhero movies will always be around, but it'll come and go in terms of, like, the frequency we get them at and stuff. And I think once all these, like, Justice League arcs and Avengers come to an end, the immediate ones, there will be a lull, and then people will look back on these movies and say, like, you know, for all their shortcomings or whatever, that thing was pretty special. And I think this is, like, one of those movies. I mean, not to overhype it or overrate it, but it was quite, seeing the three on, even though the trailers kind of ruined it, like seeing Wonder Woman and Batman on that first shot of them lining up against Doomsday. I mean, it was like one of those moments that kind of takes your breath away in the cinema a little bit, you know. And, like, there's few movies out there that do this kind of stuff, and, like, I think like you said, you just got to kind of jump on board and enjoy the ride, because, like, it's not going to go on forever, and it's get involved, because, like, it's only going to get bigger and bigger. And you can imagine, I think, Justice League's 2017, next year.
Yeah, they start shooting in April, in like a week or two, couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you got to jump on board. I mean, from, like, I guess, like, a final word from my side is, like, I thought awesome movie. I mean, I don't want to give it a score because I don't like scoring things, because then people say it's better than that movie or whatever. But, like, I would say it's a must watch. It's not perfect, but it was a very ambitious project, and I think it was awesome. I mean, the action sequences are some of the best, not in the genre, but I think in the history of filmmaking. Like, I don't even know how they did some of them. So, very cool from me. It gets a thumbs up. I don't know, any final thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree. I think for anybody that's read a lot of critical kind of reaction to this, do yourself a favor, go and see it. Try and leave a lot of your expectations or preconceived notions about the characters, if you have any. If you're a big fan, try and leave those at the door. Watch the movie, try and take it in for what it is, and then rate it afterwards. Most people, I think, will take something enjoyable out of it. Like you said, the visuals are kind of second to none. I don't think that, you're not going to walk out of it in all likelihood wishing you didn't spend the money on that.
No.
There's going to be something you enjoyed. If you're a big fan of these characters and you like kind of more realistic interpretations of the characters and comic book material in general, this is definitely a movie for you. And yeah, I mean, the visuals sell it by itself. I think even if people absolutely hate the story and the iterations of these characters, it's worth your money just to see the Trinity on the big screen.
And like I said, I mean, even if a story has your eyes rolling, for 2 hours, seeing Batman and Superman go toe to toe for the 3 minutes or 4 minutes, whatever it is in the movie, is totally worth it. And the fight at Doomsday is flipping awesome. And that's not a spoiler because it's in the trailers. So go watch it. I think as time goes on, I think that negative reception is going to slowly slide away, and people are just going to love this movie. And I think they do love this movie. It's just kind of
it's a shock to your system. I think
it's the age of the internet, and everyone has an opinion, and it's cool to hate the popular things at the moment. So I guess that's all we'll put it to. But so that's our chat on Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. Let's go check it out, and check out MenStuff.co.za if you want to see some more stuff on the website. We've got a cool article about the Easter eggs in the film, and you can check out our full review on there. And for the meantime, we're out, and I'll check you guys soon. Sweet.
Peace.